Welcome back. This is our Wheel of Time, episode 4, The Dragon Reborn, reaction and analysis, and mid-season analysis. I'm going to talk about episode 4 in more of an abbreviated fashion than in my other videos, and then I'm going to probably take the other half of the video to talk about my feelings on where this show is at the midpoint of season 1. But we'll talk about the episode first. Started off with a big set piece in Geldon. The Dragon Reborn is laying siege to the palace of the king. We spend a lot of time in later books in Geldon, so I'm glad to see it get established as a location. Very quick battle sequence. And most of this scene is spent with Logain talking to the king and talking to the voices in his head. I thought the representation of the voices in his head as part of his weaves was a nice touch. There is a bit of a mystery here because are these, as he seems to suggest in the later episode, are they the voices of his past lives? Are they the manifestations of his madness, or are they possibly Forsaken or other bad actors, Red Aja perhaps, Black Aja perhaps, propping him up as the Dragon Reborn, which is, we find out later that the Reds and some of the Black Aja are doing in this time period before the books start. So, and also the Forsaken, I believe her name is Masana. When she appears at some of the Forsaken councils, she is a figure of shadow that this seems to suggest. So, I'm not saying it is any of them. It could very well be. It's probably most likely the manifestations of his madness. But I did like how this was presented. Credits, and we get to the Aes Sedai camp. Nynaeve is overlooking, and I'm not going to go scene by scene, moment by moment in this episode. There is a lot of introduction to some new characters. We meet Alana Sedai. We meet on Aes Sedai we hadn't met in the books. I don't recall her name. She dies in the episode. Lots of exposition from her. She's opposing Leandrin, who wants to gentle Logain on the spot. She wants to bring him to the White Tower. We learn a lot more about Ajas and warders and what the different Ajas. We learn a lot about the Green Aja in this episode. I think it's the first episode the Green Aja has been mentioned. Then Moraine has been healed, and she immediately volunteers to help maintain the shield on Logain. I don't recall Moraine's strength level. I believe she's fairly powerful at the standard of Aes Sedai power at this time. We very quickly find out that there are much more powerful channelers out there besides the Aes Sedai. Egwene being one of them, Nynaeve being another. Then back with the hippies, Perrin and Egwene are still with the traveling people. I thought some of the better scenes in this episode had to do with Perrin and the actress whose name I am looking up. Maria Doyle Kennedy, who you've seen on Downton Abbey. She was in The Tudors. She is probably the biggest gun actress that has come to the show. She's just endlessly entertaining to watch. I did notice that in this shot with Perrin talking to the Tinker Lady, that Aram is over his shoulder, and that anyone who knows about where Aram's arc takes him, he becomes a follower of Perrin in later books and is never far away from him. So that foreshadowing I thought was nice. and then jump back to Rand, Tom, and Matt on the trying debating whether to sleep the night in the Grinwall's farm. The farmer Grinwall catches them, holds them at bow point. Rand talks them out of a jam and gets them some work mucking out stables. A few things I did discover, and I haven't been reading too much about Wheel of Time, the series, because I want to keep these reaction videos as my own reaction and not accidentally parrot what someone else said. I did see that the actor who is playing Matt is either leaving the show or he's been recast. I'm sure we'll find out why that is. It's kind of a shame that such things happen in show business, because I do think he has been pretty decent Matt, pretty good idea of what I would think of Matt during this arc. And also kind of, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when I talk about the first half of the season at the end of this video, but I believe this is when Tom departs the story until he returns in The Great Hunt. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I am definitely disappointed to be losing Tom after we just got him in the last episode. I thought an interesting scene between Leandrin, Nynaeve, and Lan. We're obviously meeting Leandrin. We don't quite know what to make of her. The audience doesn't quite know what to make of her. She's some kind of antagonist towards Moraine, but she's still allied with the Aes Sedai. So, not sure where they're going to take the direction. She is definitely the representation of everything in the White Tower that maybe is opposed to Moraine. We get a lot of exposition about the Blues and how they're schemers and they chase after causes. Very political, but so are the Radajah. So there's a lot of politics in the White Tower, and it mirrors our real world politics in many ways. We're back with the Tinkers, and there's another scene with Perrin that just thought this was a nice touch. This scene transitions into Rand and Matt back at the Grinwall farm. It was just a beautiful transition, great shot, great landscape. These moments, these sweeping, epic moments, are kind of part of the Wheel of Time that has drawn me in as a fan for so long. So it's great to see high production value photography being done to capture this world. Little Easter egg here: when this is not Elsa Grinwald, they named her as maybe Helga Grinwald, and she's got a Brigitte doll, who of course is a character that we meet later in the series. She's a hero of the Horn, and Matt, his arc will include the Horn of Valeri. So nice little Easter egg here. Stuff that a character that we won't necessarily see for a little while, Brigitte Silverbow. And more character building for Matt as a protector with a soft spot for little girls, because he misses his sisters. And then Tom and Rand are having a chat about Matt's emerging dark side, and we get some exposition from Tom about his nephew Owen and what happened with him when he learned he could channel, and the change in his personality, and ultimately being gentled by the Reds and committing suicide. And the suggestion that the reason that Matt has been acting so dark lately is because he's the one that can channel, and Rand still hasn't realized that he can channel and has been channeling. Back at the Aes Sedai camp, we get a sort of a bonding session between the Warders and Nynaeve around the fire. More exposition about the Warders and what the bond of the Warders between the Aes Sedai and the Warders is all about, and how close of a relationship is it. I could have used some more exposition here. We don't know. Talk about sort of the way the Warders train and the the their invisibility cloaks, I guess you would call them. Their color changing capes, I believe, is what they're called in the books. I mean, to suggest that the warders can camouflage themselves. Rosamund Pike, Moraine, and Lan go deeper into this bond. I've really enjoyed the chemistry between these two characters. Whatever happens to the series, I've really thought that they're both well cast and have really brought Moraine and Lan to life. I wish we had a little bit more a softer touch of Moraine. I think Rosamund Pike is playing it as she's a very serious woman, so she should be played very serious. But I do think her performance is a little severe, and wouldn't mind being seeing a more lighter side of the character some moments. Obviously, she's a very serious woman on a with burdened with terrible purpose, as they would say. So we're not going to get a lot of her kicking her heels up. But one of my favorite scenes so far in the series was the bath scene, where we did get to see Moraine in more of a relaxing, casual atmosphere, comfortable around Lan. And I think some of the best series scenes in the series so far are the scenes between Moraine and Lan. Back with the hippies, there's a dance, more Wheel of Time imagery overhead, and then another scene between Perrin and Ilya, who I just looked up. Raph Judkins said something along the lines in an interview that I read that Perrin's struggle is very much internal, and that's one of the reasons they made the choice to give him earlier in his arc something to, feel guilt and shame about for causing violence. Of course, the death of his wife. I thought that Maria Doyle Kennedy's portrayal of Ilya, like I said earlier in the video, was excellent. The way she explained the way of the leaf and her question to Perrin, is your life better or worse after committing an act of violence? And I think that's really to the heart of Perrin's arc. So I really thought this was some of the stronger business in the episode, and possibly carried off by both actors' performances, because I think they both gave strong performances. Back at the Grinwall farm, Rand has a dream. Balazamon shows up. He sees all four of his friends, Egwene, Mat, and Perrin. They're each kind of doing things that has to do with what their arc is going to be. He awakens and finds Mat's missing. They go into the farmhouse and find the Grinwall family has been slaughtered. Initially, it appears that maybe it's Mat who did it, but then we find out very quickly that there's a Midril there, a Fade as they're calling him in the show. And Tom takes on the Fade in hand-to-hand combat and tells the boys to flee. The boys do. And if I recall correctly, this is when Tom leaves the group. He saves Rand and Mat from a Fade, and they head for, I think, Bail Doman's riverboat is the next stop in their journey to Tarvalon and Bail Doman. And we've already heard mention of riverboats before, so I do think that's been established as something that exists in this world, and I think that's where they're heading next. Gonna miss Tom. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the mid-season recap. Some more bonding between Nynaeve and Lan. Lan is praying. We hear about Mallory for, I think, the first time. Nynaeve says a prayer that she said her parents told her. The last thing they said to her, it was in the old tongue, has to do with King Aemon and the last battle of Manetheren. Good chemistry between these two. Definitely excited to see where they go in their arc. Aes Sedai camp comes under attack by Logain's followers, and we get just a pretty smooth action sequence coupled with Logain breaking out of his shield in the cave. We see some channeling by the Green Ajah. I did want to mention that this is Alana Sedai, who is a very important character in the future books. She has a bunch of warders who we've also been introduced to in this episode. She does some battle magic to hold off Logain's army. Back at the camp, Moraine is grilling Logain on why she should believe he's the Dragon Reborn. This was sort of set up earlier in the episode when we talked about what the Blue Aja are all about. Moraine clearly is, thinking of the mindset that, how are we going to fight the last battle if we don't ally ourselves, and when I say ourselves, the White Tower, with the Dragon Reborn, whereas the Red Aja pretty much are like, nope, gentle all men who can channel. And we'll worry about the last battle when it gets here. And yeah, it all culminates in the cave. Logain does some channeling and kills or disables everybody in the room. And Nynaeve comes in and does her big, hits the reset button, saves everybody. I don't know what weave this is, but they should use it all the time because it's just, it heals everybody, it defeats the bad guys. And that's all you need to think about. And so that's where I think I'll segue into my review of where I think the show stands at the midpoint in the season. I think anybody who has watched this series and is familiar with the source material and has sort of an ear and an eye for storytelling would agree we've got some issues. And when I started this series out, I made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to be overly negative, because I'm sure there would be plenty of negative coverage of a book series that adapted for the television that has existed for 40 years, 30 years, and is beloved by all. Of course they weren't going to get it right, because what's right changes depending on who you're talking to. And instead I was going to focus on what I enjoyed of it. And I'm going to stick to that. I'm not going to just spend the next 5 minutes shitting all over what I think has been an entertaining 4 episodes. There's been good performances. The music has been good. I've really enjoyed some of the longer shots, the establishing shots, the transitions. It's felt like its own world. I guess the problem is they're leaving so much out, and they're clearly rushing, and they clearly have to rush because there's only 8 episodes in the first season, and I don't know how you tell, a 1,000-page novel like The Eye of the World in 8 episodes, and how you not only that but also set up for an epic journey ahead that's only just beginning. Now, even when Robert Jordan was writing The Eye of the World, I believe I heard it was told to me that he wasn't sure if they were going to pick up the novel as a series of novels. So he wanted to close it out in case it didn't get picked up as a series, so that it could stand on its own as a standalone novel. And it does that, and that's one of the reasons we get a very abrupt ending to The Eye of the World. They end up in Camlin. They hear that Sightblinder is trying to blind the Eye of the World, and they agree to go straight to the Borderlands, where they confront 2 of the Forsaken. Rand channels, figures out he's the Dragon Reborn, and the end of the first book. And then with the second book, we get a lot of reintroduction to stuff we already know, but sort of tightened up so that it can sustain itself through the rest of the series. I always tell people that you can't judge The Wheel of Time until you've read The Great Hunt, because I know a lot of people, some people don't enjoy The Eye of the World as much because it is so similar to Lord of the Rings, and a lot of people are like, I can get Lord of the Rings, I can go read Lord of the Rings. That's at least what I've heard some people say. But once you get into The Great Hunt, Dragon Reborn, Shadow Rising, it clearly goes in its own direction and stands on its own two legs. And the people who are behind this television show are definitely trying to give us some of that, some of what's coming sooner than we get it in the books. And I like that. But we also need to get what's in the books that's good that we're not getting. And I could name a bunch of stuff, and I'll name a few things, but I really want to talk in particular about Tom. We haven't heard much about the Heron Mark sword. We haven't heard much about the 3 coins that Moraine gave to Rand, Matt, and Perrin. We have very little to do with the wolves. We have not met Elias Manchura. I know we will get to that point. And anyway, there's a bunch of stuff missing that I don't know how they're going to circle back on when it becomes necessary to the plot. In particular, it does seem like Tom is not going to be in the show anymore, because unless they rewrite him into the plot again, because Tom and Rand and Matt get separated after the fight with the Fade. And I really thought Tom was going to be a real refreshing addition to the show, because he was going to give us someone who was a little bit more experienced, but without Moraine's agenda, so that he could actually talk to the boys. And we got a little bit of that when he was telling Rand about Owen, but there was more. There could have been more there, and we could have also gotten much more of a balanced, natural acting approach to that character that we're not seeing with these other characters, because these other characters are very much on mission. Rand, Matt, Perrin, Egwene, Nynaeve, Matt, and Lan all are, they're all on a mission. And so anything that's distracting from that mission, they don't have time for. Whereas Tom is just wandering the world. Although he does say that, the Gleemen are more than just Gleemen, or something like that. But I thought with Tom we could get a little more of a lighthearted character, a little more humor, a little more of a human character with faults. And that's the other issue with why I knew when I saw this episode that I was going to make this video and it wasn't going to be, full marks all around, is Nynaeve coming in at the end and casting or channeling and saving the day is just way too neat of a way to wrap up this week's episode. And I think it's a little bit similar to why the new Star Wars films got mixed reviews, because you can't have this initiate, this character who has a bunch of potential to become a powerful sorceress, just immediately pick it up. And that's, one we never, we see Luke Skywalker train. Luke Skywalker has a great arc. He starts as a farm boy with hay in his hair, and he ends up a Jedi Knight. And it takes us 3 2-hour movies to get there. Whereas Rey, here's your lightsaber. You're the most powerful Jedi who's ever lived. No training necessary. Go get him, kid. And that's just not fun. We want to grow with our characters. And I felt like we were growing a little bit with Nynaeve, but to just have her come in and, I'm more powerful than any of y'all. And yes, she has the potential to be more powerful than any of the Aes Sedai there. But she doesn't learn how to channel for 2 or 3 books. Now, granted, I'm not trying to say this needs to be exactly like the books. I'm saying good storytelling takes us on a journey. It doesn't drag us, and okay, make sure you hit this plot. point, and make sure you hit this plot point. And that, I think, is ultimately what's going to be the downfall of this season, is they are really just trying to check every box to make sure that this appeals to the audience that was the Game of Thrones audience. It is the Witcher audience, the high fantasy millennial Gen X audience that wants to consume this type of content. That sort of 18 to 35-year-old demographic, which is super important. And they've done a lot of things right. The music is on point. The setting is on point. The writing is decent. It's clearly, there are clearly some intelligent, talented people behind this show. But there's such a thing as playing it too safe. Because unless you can give something to people that they have not seen before somewhere else, then there's no reason for them to continue watching this program versus all the other entertainment options that are out there. And I think this might, show that you can throw all the money at something, and you can bring all the very talented people in it and still not build something that's not any greater than the sum of its parts. And that will be the difference between this being merely a good show and being a great show. And I think because The Wheel of Time is a great series, it's up there right at the top of the greatest epic fantasy series ever written, many of us feel like it deserves an adaptation that is equally great. And I haven't seen anything in the first half of the first season to indicate that. They haven't hit that mark yet, as far as I'm concerned. But maybe they will. And I don't want to... And I'll just leave it with one thought, is that in order for a show to grow its beard, the characters need to be smooth shaven so that they can grow that beard. What I mean by that is we need maybe a first season where not everything works, so that when the second season comes along, they figured out that, the characters are a lot more interested, the audience is a lot more interested in Riker and these single character driven stories. So let's tell more stories about Worf and Picard and Data, and maybe less, campy, Wesley saves the day again stories, because those aren't testing very well. But you need those stories that don't test as well to figure out what's working. So maybe we let Perrin grow his beard instead of introducing him already bearded. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for watching. Please take a minute to like and subscribe the channel. When we get another episode, I will get another video up. Until then, we will see you next time.